Proportional Response. Book 1, Chapter 15, Part 13, Will You Be My Neighbor? Hannibal forced his face to remain neutral after Henry announced that they hadn't forgotten the Yoltons still owed reparations. His brother didn't deign to so much as look at either of the Zoltan, however, but turned a wide smile to a softly chuckling council before he continued speaking. That said, we also understand that all of you are facing population pressures on your own worlds, so we have an additional proposal. The Senate of the Confederated Worlds drafted this proposal some time ago in preparation for the moment when we finally could publicly declare our habitation of these worlds. I will send those documents to you now. Hannibal's screen brightened as a document appeared. He glanced at it, then heard Juro gasp and took a closer look. Madness! No one has ever done such a thing. And yet, Henry waited for the gasps and twitters of surprise to circulate through the room before he continued. Every one of these worlds has space set aside for colonies from its closest neighbors. Now, some of you would not be able to handle the gravity of the worlds in question, we know, but we don't want any of our friends to feel that they are not getting fair treatment. So those worlds have built, or are in the process of building, special Lagrange point station colonies designed specifically for our neighbors who would have trouble being comfortable on the surface of our world. Make no mistake, friends, we mean it when we say these will be independent colonies. The treaties necessary are attached, and we have done our best to tailor each treaty to the sensibility of your separate nations, but they are all fairly similar. The land, or stations, set aside for colonization belong to the colonizing nation, for as long as that nation remains an independent power. There is some language in there about mutual defense against aggression, but it is carefully worded to be clear that mutual defense is for the world in question, not for more general military action. Henry leaned forward a bit, and his tone lost its usual jovial lilt. Understand that this means that every human on those worlds will fight to defend your colonies just as hard as we will fight to defend our own. Henry stood straighter, and his smile took over his face once again. There can, of course, be some negotiation in those treaties, and we do not want any of you to feel obligated to sign. We pledge to keep the colonial lands set aside for at least the next 100 years as nature preserves, to be held in trust against your eventual use. Henry waved his hand as if to brush everything he'd just said aside. Now, before I go on, there is one thing which yon self-styled overlord prattled on about I need to address, and that is her accusation that we have been carelessly baiting the old machines. I tell you, nothing could be further from the truth. We have been anything but careless, and we certainly haven't been baiting them. We have, carefully and with great deliberation, been working on additional queries to discover more about what they are doing, what they have done, and the rules that govern their actions. Of course, so have the overlords, and here is the evidence of it. Henry hit a button and Hannibal's console pinged as more documents arrived. The difference is that now the matter is out in the open, we will share our findings. You will find both evidence of the Zoltan duplicity in this and the various new queries we have discovered in the documents I just sent. Of greatest import in those documents is something that we know, without question, that the Zoltan's fumbling attempts haven't discovered, and has left us somewhat concerned. There is a countdown timer running on the old machines. It appears to be exactly synchronized for all of them, and they will immediately stop responding to queries for a couple of days anytime you query it, but it is there. The only thing we have been able to tell about it, so far, is that it has approximately 400 years left on it. Henry gave a dramatic pause as he let the revelation sink in. He then shook his head and opened his hands as if to ask for quiet. I will field questions from each of you, happily, about what we have discovered, but that is for later. To return to the worlds we occupy, there is one further charge I must refute. Some have claimed that the overage that humanity has paid in League contributions is less than what we would have paid on these colonies if we had declared them. This is false. I will not accuse anyone of lying, please don't misunderstand. Most of you didn't know until today that we even possessed these worlds, so how could they lie about such information without having foreknowledge of today's topic? Henry quirked a half smile as everyone let that sink in, then sent another parcel of documents. These documents are the proof, given the output, population, and costs of each colony, that humanity has paid far and above any expected contribution to the League, even after the output of these colonies is taken into account. Indeed, by some measures, We could have probably reduced our contribution if we had outwardly claimed these colonies, since it is normal to allow for reductions to a nation putting forth the expense of a colonization. We are not, however, making any such claim directly. We are simply opening our books, as it were, and letting each of you decide for yourselves." Henry took a deep breath, looked around the chamber, and gave a fond smile. "I promise to be brief, my fellows, so I will conclude my comments with a few thoughts. Humanity has worked hard to colonize these worlds, learn their dangers, make them safe as we can, and bring forth their treasures to enrich us all. Each world has unique character to it, including delectable foods, or breathtaking views, or astonishingly beautiful natural trinkets, which we wish to share with our neighbors. Your overlords propose that they should be allowed to steal all of our work and take possession of those worlds instead, or that we should have to pay money to be allowed to keep what we rightfully claimed. So, I ask you one simple question. Who would you rather have as your neighbors?" A wave of dark amusement swept through the chamber, and then a single clap rang, loud and strong, through the air. It repeated, immediately joined by more. Enible's hands had barely twitched to join in, when Kaslar's pressure on his foot stopped him. "The damned plan," he thought to himself, and held still. Jalat and Kilantar stood there looking at the crowd. Jalat's face shone with fury, and Enibel could almost swear he detected a faint tinge of red in her eyes. Kilantar looked angered, frightened, and yet somewhat satisfied. He probably told Jalat this entire plan was a bad idea, possibly even some of why. No doubt she will take the failure out on him, however. Is it a bad thing that I can't bring myself to feel sorry for him? The applause continued, and some in the gallery began to stand, stomping their feet. Jalat finally stood ramrod straight, stared blankly ahead, and hit a control on her platform. It turned so that she faced away from the council, and floated back up to its appointed spot. By the time she reached her place, Kilantar had already, without formally closing the meeting, departed. Enibel affected a slightly troubled look on his face, but refused to acknowledge Jalat as her platform slotted in place beside his. She, too, left the chamber without a backward glance. The clapping and stomping continued. To Enibel, that clapping had first sounded like salvation and sweet release. By the time Jalat left the council chamber, it sounded to Enibel like the drums of war.